Welcome to Hannity, and tonight we have damning new information on a developing story you won't hear from the mainstream Destroy Trump media. And in just moments, we're going to uncover two shocking pieces of evidence that may show the unmasked members of the Trump team may have been surveilled by officials inside of the Obama administration. And that is tonight's blockbuster opening monologue. All right, let's go back to March the 4th. Remember, President Trump, he was ridiculed by the alt-left propaganda Destroy Trump media. Why? He tweeted out that members of his transition team had been wiretapped by the Obama administration. But tonight, there is a damning piece of tape circulating that could vindicate President Trump. Now, this clip we're going to show you is from March 2nd. It's from an MSNBC interview with Dr. Evelyn Farkas. Now, she served in the Obama administration from 2012 through 2015 as the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Russia, Ukraine, and Eurasia. Now, this clip from the interview earlier this month, it could prove the Obama administration was very much involved in the surveillance of Trump transition team members. Wow. Watch this.
I was urging my former colleagues and frankly speaking, the people on the Hill, it was more actually aimed at telling the Hill people, get as much information as you can, get as much intelligence as you can before President Obama leaves the administration, because I had a fear that somehow that information would disappear with the senior people who left. So it would be hidden away in the bureaucracy, that the Trump folks, if they found out how we knew what we knew about the Trump staff's dealing with Russians, that they would try to compromise those sources and methods, meaning we would no longer have access to that intelligence. So I became very worried because not enough was coming out into the open, and I knew that there was more. We have very good intelligence on Russia. So then I had talked to some of my former colleagues, and I knew that they were trying to also help get information to the Hill.
All right, this is very, very important. Let's break down what Evelyn Farkas is actually saying here. And while I'm doing this, by the way, I want you to remember very crucial words, 4 words: surveillance, unmasking, intelligence leaking. Now, first, pay close attention. She's admitting here surveillance of Trump and his associates and transition team took place. Listen to this.
It was more actually aimed at telling the Hill people, get as much information as you can, get as much intelligence as you can before President Obama leaves the administration, because I had a fear that somehow that information would disappear with the senior people.
All right. Now, what is the information she's actually talking about? Now, obviously, Farkas is referring to surveilled information on the Trump transition team. Listen next as she admits that there was unmasking, in other words, revealing the identities of those Trump team members.
That the Trump folks, if they found out how we knew what we knew about the Trump staff's dealing with Russians, that they would try to compromise those sources and methods, meaning we would no longer have access to that intelligence.
Pretty blockbuster. Third, she admits that intelligence leaking was taking place. By the way, that could very well be a felony.
I became very worried because not enough was coming out into the open, and I knew that there was more. We have very good intelligence on Russia. So then I had talked to some of my former colleagues, and I knew that they were trying to also help get information to the Hill.
All right, let's go backwards. Surveillance, unmasking, intelligence leaking, all acknowledged in that tape by Evelyn Farkas. Now, for days, we have been asking on this program, who knew what, when, and where? So, did Obama officials commit a crime here? And how did Evelyn Farkas, a former, relatively low-ranking Obama administration official, how did she know about all this surveillance? Now, that brings us to another big story tonight. For weeks, right here on this program, Sarah Carter, John Solomon from Circa News, they have been doing excellent reporting on the surveillance story. Now, they uncovered the existence of an FBI investigation into a server that was being utilized by Trump Tower. By the way, that's where the campaign was. They also discovered a FISA warrant that allowed federal officials to capture Trump team communications. Now, prior to the president taking office, all this occurred. Now they have another bombshell report, and it shows high-ranking officials with direct access to President Obama may have had access to unmasked federal surveillance of the Trump transition and their team members, and may have briefed President Obama himself about the information they were collecting on then President-elect Trump. Now, my prediction is that as each day goes by, more and more information will be becoming available, and soon we're going to have the answer to these very important questions. Joining us now with their explosive report from Circa News, Sarah Carter, John Solomon. Thank you, John, especially for making a rare appearance. Sarah's been doing all the heavy lifting on the show.
She has indeed.
This is very important. Now, how is it that Evelyn Farkas, Sarah, who left the administration, is talking specifically about surveillance? It seems like she's admitting the surveillance that you've been reporting on and John's been reporting on, that took place of Trump transition team members. She's admitting that they unmasked them because they're Trump transition team members. And it seems like she's talking about, well, we got to get it to our friends that they're A, politicizing intelligence, and B, talking about leaking intelligence. What are your thoughts?
My thoughts are, with the story that John and I broke today with regards to how the Obama administration loosened a lot of the regulations that protected the privacy of Americans. I mean, this is going back all the way to 2011. Remember, everyone thought for a long time, and once it was revealed that in January, when Obama expanded Executive Order 12333 to all the agencies, everybody was just focused on that. But nobody was focusing on what happened before that. And I think with what John and I were able to show is that, look, it didn't happen just in January. That expanded it even further into all 16 agencies. But in 2011, there was already the unraveling of what we consider our privacy rights. And then again in 2015, it happened again. So they were already set up to look at these unredacted, unmasked transcripts between Americans and foreign officials, or foreigner to foreigner, that we're talking about Americans.
All right,
and I think that's a huge revelation.
Because I think this is important. John, I'll throw this to you because Evelyn also served as an advisor to Hillary Clinton in the 2016 presidential campaign. According to one report, was up for a position if she had won. So she's out in 2015. We're talking about 2016 here. How would somebody that was once a rather low-level official, with no offense to her, she's serving her country, how would she have known that there was surveillance of Trump and his transition team? If you break down, if they found out what we knew about the Trump staff dealing with the Russians, wow, how would she possibly know that outside of government now?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And her appearance raises more questions than we have answers to right now. But it's possible the surveillance started earlier when she was a Russia expert inside the Pentagon in 2015. That's something we have to look at. It's possible someone...
John,
yep.
What you just said, they could have been surveilling in 2015?
Certainly possible. Listen, we don't know, so I don't want to leap to any conclusions, but that's one possibility. Another possibility is someone passes information along to her. It could be some of the information she has isn't classified at all, though she used the word intelligence, so that's a red flag, right? I think her appearance on that show is going to raise a lot of questions, and we may not know the answers to them for a little bit of time, but there's certainly some important questions that she's raised in that appearance.
Let me go through a quick bullet point list and ask if you both agree. Do you both agree she's admitting surveillance at least of the Trump transition team and the president-elect took place? She seems to confirm that. Do you both agree with that?
I'd say, listen, there are many different ways you can find out what's going on overseas. Surveillance is one of them. Wiretaps is one of them. Intercepts is one of them. Sometimes human intelligence is another one. A foreign government comes in and said, hey, we found this out about an American.
If they found out how we knew what we knew, that would compromise sources and methods.
Right.
That's
but sources and methods could be humans, too. It doesn't necessarily mean surveillance or wiretaps. It could be one of many different ways.
And it's also
and it may be all ways. It may be all of those ways.
That's right.
They may have utilized all of those ways.
Okay, so it seems to acknowledge surveillance took place. Had to. How else would she know this information? Some sort of surveillance. That's the only way that they'd get that. All right. She's also revealing when she talks about if they found out how we knew, what we knew about the Trump staff dealing with the Russians, doesn't that mean some unmasking took place of some kind? Sarah?
I think so. I mean, I think we already showed through our reporting that unmasking took place. And what we know for a fact is that with Flynn, and it's on the separate, investigation, his name was leaked. So Lieutenant General Mike Flynn's name was leaked out there. So we know for a fact unmasking took place. But what unmasking was it? Who was unmasked? And who authorized the unmasking?
She's saying the Trump staff, what we knew about the Trump staff.
Yes, but who in the Trump staff?
How would they possibly know unless somebody's leaking? Now, then she talks about, I knew it was important. I was urging my colleagues on the Hill to keep this information, gather this information. Who are these colleagues? Do they have security clearances? Should they have access to this information? That would be, if you leak any intelligence, even if it's to a member of Congress, wouldn't that still serve as a felony under the Espionage Act, John?
If it was transmitted through channels that were not authorized, absolutely there could be criminal conduct. If it wasn't classified, there may not be. There's just so many questions we don't know, but I will say that her appearance raised more questions, and I talked to some people on Capitol Hill late today that were telling us they have the same questions. They're going to start asking their colleagues, the Democrats on the Hill, were you taking information from this woman and her friends?
Is this possible? Now, we all can go back to Watergate. And by the way, number one, it proves Trump was right. There was surveillance. We now have confirmed through you guys, James Roseneer, Fox News, and I think this also backs us up. Trump was surveilled. He was right in his tweet that he sent out that day. If we go back to Watergate and we look at Watergate, wasn't that about a break-in, about a political opponent? Didn't that become a big scandal and a president resigned? My question to both of you, do you think based on where this story is now, this has the potential of being even bigger? If we're talking about surveillance, unmasking, leaking intelligence, even bigger than Watergate? Is that a possibility where this ends up? Sarah.
Yes, I do. I think so. I think it's something that needs to be investigated, and I think we need to look at what civil liberties here have been violated and how far this expansion, these regulations have been loosened to allow people. I mean, even in our story today, we talked about top Obama aides viewing unmasked intercepts on a routine basis. What were they viewing? Why were they viewing it? Why did they need to view these? Some may be legitimate, but if we find out that they were just viewing conversations between, even then, President Trump and other foreign officials and members of his team.
That's illegal if you don't have a warrant for President Trump, even if it was picked up incidentally. John, how big does this story potentially get?
A couple weeks ago when Democrats were throwing Watergate around, I said the same thing on your show, which is, listen, Watergate had a lot of crimes in it. We're a long way from proving crimes yet, but I do think that there's
wait
a really...
Wait a minute, don't you think a crime committed with releasing the intelligence information on General Flynn, isn't that a felony?
We have a leak investigation, but Watergate was much larger than leaks, as you know. In fact, the one leak that made Watergate, a lot of people hailed as a great moment. We're just a long way from there yet. But listen, there are important issues that need to be answered here. And the story that we broke today, if you're a Republican, a Democrat, an independent, you should be really concerned how easy it is today that large numbers of members of the government, for a very low threshold, can ask the NSA, hey, if you intercepted John Solomon or Sean Hannity, could you unmask his name because we're trying to understand this intelligence. It used to be that was a very rare moment. When you look at the rules that Obama changed in 2011 and through 2017, it is very easy now for the intelligence community to get American's name and see what they were intercepted.
We got to take a break. We'll have more with Sarah and John on this blockbuster breaking story, new information we have tonight. We'll also get legal reaction from Jay Sekulow and Tom Fitton. And also, again, today, we asked CBS to release the full 45 to 50-minute interview I had with Ted Koppel. They said to the New York Times they will not release it. We're going to get reaction from Joe Concha, Matt Schlapp, all of that. And Herman Cain is here with us tonight. And welcome back to Hannity, and we are covering two big developing stories, each surrounding the potential surveillance of the president-elect Donald Trump and his team by Obama administration officials. We continue with Circa News' Sarah Carter and John Solomon. All right, so your piece today, let's start at the beginning. As his presidency drew to a close, Barack Obama's top aides routinely reviewed intelligence reports gleaned from the National Security Agency's incidental intercepts of Americans abroad, taking advantage of the rules that their boss relaxed starting in 2011 to help government better fight terrorism, espionage, etc. Were they using, under the guise, Sarah, of protecting the country and legitimate surveillance of America's enemies, friends, foes? Were they doing that, using that as a ruse to tap into Donald Trump's transition team in Trump Tower, do you think? Is that a possibility?
I think that's the concern that a lot of the sources that have spoken to John and I have. I mean, their concern is, look, we want to be able to go after the terrorists. We want to be able to find these hackers and cyber espionage and counter espionage. We need this. But are people using this as a backdoor to actually spy on Americans? Is this being politicized? Is this political espionage? And that's the question that we all need to be asking. And we all need to kind of understand that civil liberties here are being, in a sense, being violated if what our sources are saying is true.
John, your reaction?
Yeah, I agree. Listen, there was one intelligence official we talked to who was, defending the intelligence community. But even he said, listen, you know what? We know that this could be this unmasking could be used for abusive or political purposes. And that's why we try to put strict rules in place. But when those rules get loosened, the potential goes up for abuse or political espionage. And those are the questions I think the Hill and the intelligence community is going to have to answer.
Based on, your big report today, this is a big blockbuster story. I mean, you're saying that Obama loosened the rules. Now, this is before he modified Executive Order 12333.
5 years before.
5 years before, so he was lessening the rules. And then I've got to ask this question again. I mean, here you have this Evelyn Farkas going back to, when you tie that into your story, that they're loosening these rules. How does somebody who's working for Hillary, who left the Obama administration, possibly know about surveillance or potential surveillance at Trump Tower and the need to get this information to her friends on the Hill because it might disappear once Donald Trump becomes president? I mean, is there any level of intelligence that everybody didn't have access to at this point? Sarah?
Yeah, well, I think the FBI will probably have a lot of questions for her. And I think that that's very concerning because what we don't know about her is, was she holding onto this TS clearance? Was she still working in some capacity, beyond
she
that?
Was officially out of the administration. She was gone. She was working for Hillary. Last question. Do you think the mainstream media will end up with egg on its face? Here we have Clapper. We have Admiral Rogers, we have Comey all saying it did not impact the election. There's been no evidence of any collusion with the Trump campaign. You guys have reported on that. The media has been going 8 months without any evidence about Russia. Do you think this blows up in the media's face? Real quick, Sarah, and then John.
Well, I think they're definitely going to have to follow down the path of the truth. And eventually they're going to have to get on board with that. And that depends on whether they choose to keep running down a certain rabbit hole or somebody comes out and reveals in Congress or something else and brings closure to this from our stories.
John?
Yeah, listen, I think we're going to look back in some reporting in the last 6-7 months, and it's going to feel breathless and McCarthyite in the limelight. But keep in mind, the investigation goes on, and new things can come to light, and this narrative could change. But the body of evidence today, I think there's been a little bit of breathless and overreacted reporting.
All right. Thank you both. Great work as always. We'll have you back. We're going to continue on this story. And when we come back, we're going to get reaction to Sarah and John's reporting from Jay Sekulow, Tom Fitton. We'll look into all the legal issues that may be involved as it relates to surveillance, unmasking, and intelligence leaks. And we'll keep asking, by the way, CBS News and Ted Koppel on Sunday morning to release my interview that we had, the 50-plus minutes. Why won't they release it? We'll get reaction from Joe Concha, Matt Schlapp. Also, Herman Cain is here to weigh in on the Rockville rape case. And we're going to show you statistics about crimes that nobody else in the media will tell you. Straight ahead. And welcome back to Hannity. So, as we told you in the last two segments, according to Sarah Carter and John Solomon's reporting, Susan Rice, John Brennan, and Loretta Lynch were cleared to, quote, request and consume unmasked intelligence reports. So, will the mainstream media cover that bombshell? Here with reaction from Judicial Watch, Tom Fitton, and from the American Center for Law and Justice, Jay Sekulow. Jay.
Yes, sir.
All right. Break this down legally from us from the issue of surveillance.
Right.
Unmasking. leaking intelligence based on, she's not even in the administration anymore.
No, at the time that she said that she was aware of the information, the intelligence, she was no longer an employee of the State Department. So what you have to ask is, the first question a lawyer asks is...
Well, she was actually the former assistant defense secretary.
Defense secretary. So
right.
The first question you have to ask, how did a former defense secretary find out about this information when she was gone? So that brings up felony number one. Who leaked her that information? That's number one. Number two, we were concerned that the Obama administration officials involved in this would be known by the Trump administration. Well, guess what? The President of the United States is Donald Trump, so of course he would know that. So then it brings up the third issue, and the third issue is here. What in the world did they think that they had that they could justify doing this? And Sean, I said on your program weeks ago, Loretta Lynch, John Brennan, these were the ones to be looking at. Look who signed off on these orders. Look who wanted this unmasking. So you've got the whole issue of unlawful unmaskings, leaked information, by the way, then to a third party who was no longer a government official.
By the way, it was more than that. According to one report, she was an advisor to Hillary Clinton at the time.
Well, that would even make it worse. But, you know, at that point, you're pouring felony on top of felony because...
Do you think this woman, based on what she said on that show, is in legal jeopardy? Or
I would tell her to hire a lawyer. Don't call me, but she needs to hire a lawyer.
Immediately.
Immediately, because well, first of all, she's going on television talking about how she got information. They were trying to hide it from the incoming administration.
Yeah.
So the FBI needs to, or the Department of Justice should impanel this grand jury tonight.
When she talks about, you know, getting this information to colleagues on the Hill,
right.
Is she talking about leaking?
Well, what colleagues on the Hill?
Right.
She is now in private life. What does a colleague on the Hill mean? Friends of hers that are on the other party?
Wow, how could she not know what she was saying here?
That's what's so, Sean,
bizarre.
What's so bizarre about all of this is, you know that the Loretta Lynch, they knew better than all of this, but they did it anyway. So they thought they'd get away with it impunity.
Tom?
They also thought the other nominee was going to be president.
What's your take, Tom, legally?
Well, you know, as Jay, you know, I'm not a lawyer, but I've been doing this scandal work for 20 years almost. And I know the hallmarks of a scandal. You've got administration officials working improperly with outside former officials to launder information that they're not allowed to send out and around. This reminds me of the FBI Filegate scandal under Clinton, where they were looking at raw data from FBI files in the White House, or at least had access to it. Here they were accessing raw intelligence data that was arguably protected by the Privacy Act and other laws if you require criminal sanctions in theory. And then they're also working with Congress on this. So here you've got the elements of the scandal and where the investigations need to go. Not only a criminal investigation, but getting back to the so-called congressional investigation, whether by the intelligence committees or select committee. This is what they need to look at. Who the Obama administration was working with on the outside and on the inside to improperly disseminate this classified
Let's
material.
go back to the legal. Again, surveillance. There's legitimate surveillance.
Sure.
But you're not supposed to unmask an American that gets picked up.
Well, and if you get unmasked improperly, it could be a felony. It could be also a civil action.
But she admits here.
No,
quote,
she's bragging about it.
Yeah, she said, if they found out how we knew, what we knew about the Trump staff.
Right.
So they had to be unmasked to know.
Of course that. So how did this level of person outside of government end up with unmasked intelligence on the President of the United States or his team? How in the world how did Loretta Lynch, who's, you know, by the way, doesn't mind meeting on an airplane with President Clinton, how does she justify having this out there? How did she justify the sign-off? And then how did this individual, this Ms. Farkas, get this information?
And when she talks about...
And then there are friends on the Hill. What are they
friends
talking
on the
about
Hill,
here?
urging colleagues...
No, Sean.
Does that sound like she's talking about leaking the information?
Well, yeah, she wanted to make sure it was there so that the Trump administration didn't destroy it or some statement like that. Here's the concern. The concern is the intelligence apparatus in the United States has rules that they have to follow like every other agency. And it appears that in the waning days, or maybe the last year of the former administration, they viewed those laws as advisory opinions,
in
not
other
law.
words, our intelligence, at least at some level, was politicized.
Completely.
And people's names were amassed, and it was shared.
Yes, and I go back to James Comey, who just days ago, goes on air in a hearing in Congress and says we're investigating Trump associates and Russia, but well, of course he never wants to disclose an investigation, then asked if in fact he was investigating, after he was investigating the leaks of classified information, what his real response is, what he actually said was not he wasn't doing an investigation, he said, I'm not willing to say that because I'm not willing to say they were classified. Now, everybody at this point knows it's classified information, but that's how they're playing it, that close. And what the Republicans need to do is ask the next question. For instance, when the president tweeted out, in quotes, wiretap, which we all know is surveillance,
right.
Why didn't anybody at that hearing say, well, let's put the wiretap portion of it, which hardly anybody uses wiretap. Was he surveilled? They wouldn't have answered the question.
Well, the leadership of the FBI is the leadership of the FBI is a real problem. Comey refused to deal with adequately the mishandling of classified information by Hillary Clinton, and then now by the Obama administration, he doesn't want to look at that. He's as political FBI director as anyone we've had.
How big is this on a scale of 1 to 10?
Oh, I think this is gigantic. Remember, you were talking about Watergate. Watergate was the cover-up. That was the problem. Here, the act itself
is the problem.
Could be the problem, and that's the actual.
And maybe a cover-up on top.
On top of that, so you could have one on top of another.
It's going to get interesting, and I think the media will end up with egg on their face as usual. They're always wrong. Coming up, now we keep asking CBS to release my 45-minute plus interview with Ted Koppel. They say to the New York Times they're not going to do it. What are they afraid of? We'll get reaction tonight from Joe Concha, Matt Schlapp. Also, we have the latest on the rape case in Rockville, Maryland. Defense attorneys for the illegal immigrant rape suspects are trying to say it was consensual. She was 14 years old. We'll get reaction and an explanation from Herman Cain and more. And welcome back to Hannity. So CBS News still won't respond to our request to release my full 45, 50-minute interview with Ted Koppel. By the way, they told the New York Times they won't release it. This past weekend, they aired 70 seconds of a nearly hour sit-down. Tonight, we want to show you another example of CBS edited fake news. Now, back in September, remember during the election, CBS edited out a portion of an interview with President Bill Clinton where he talks about Hillary's health after she nearly fainted. Remember that? And here's what aired on Evening News that night.
You wonder if it's not more serious.
No,
than dehydration.
She's been, well, if it is, it's a mystery to me and all of her doctors. Rarely, but on more than one occasion over the last many, many years, the same sort of things happened to her when she just got severely dehydrated.
Rarely, but it did happen. Now, that's not everything Bill Clinton said. Let's now play the full clip that CBS played on their morning show the next day. Now listen closely to what Bill Clinton really says here.
You wonder if it's not more serious.
No,
than dehydration.
She's been, well, if it is, it's a mystery to me and all of her doctors, because it's frequently, rarely, but on more than one occasion over the last many, many years, the same sort of things happened to her when she just got severely dehydrated.
Now, Evening News, they cut out Bill Clinton saying frequently, not frequently. And the question is, why didn't CBS News play the full soundbite? At the time, the network said it was edited, quote, purely for time reasons. Well, it was only 3 seconds. And as I mentioned earlier, we reached out to CBS News asking them for a statement and to release the full interview. They told the New York Times they wouldn't release it. We have not heard back. Joining us now from the American Conservative Union, their chairman, Matt Schlapp, and from the Hill, Joe Concha. Good to see you both. What's your take on this from a media reporter's standpoint that's not part of the cabal of media reporters that retweet each other all day and live in their bubble?
The argument in these situations, whenever a news organization says we had to edit it down because of time constraints, that's fine, but that's an analog argument in a digital world. The internet is infinite. CBSNews.com is infinite. There are no time constraints on the internet. So when you put the interview on there, it shows full transparency and it will shut you up and everybody can see quite a compelling interview.
Why do you just say it like that? I'm going to shut you up.
No, in other words,
now you sound like Koppel.
Well, you're making CBS News go to the New York Times and say we're not going to put it out. Well, why not do that? Koppel and you combined have 7, 8 decades of experience in news. It's probably a pretty compelling conversation that might get a couple of clicks.
got to be
put it
honest.
out there.
It was a great give and take. And listen, I like Koppel on Nightline. This is not personal with me and Koppel. I think it was a cheap shot. 70 seconds. I think it was well over 50 minutes total. That's a cheap shot.
What you could have done was what a pro-gun rights group did last year with the Katie Couric documentary. I don't know if you remember this. There were some misleading edits. I mean, horribly misleading. To make them all look dumb. They couldn't answer a simple question about gun safety and terrorism. So one guy in the room taped the entire thing on his phone, the audio, and then released the whole thing later. And now there's a lawsuit against the people that did that documentary. So maybe that's the way we have to handle these things now.
You know, Matt, I will tell you my reason that I think they won't release the tape is because Ted asked me the first question. I give an answer. And he goes, none of that will air on this show. And I'm like, well, why am I here? And then for the rest of the interview, I'm taunting him. Ted, are you going to include this? Ted, are you going to include that? Hey, Ted, I think you really need to include what I just said here and here and here. And so they don't want to show that because it exposes what I'm calling edited fake news. What you can do in an edit room, it could be a beautiful work of art.
Yeah, what you realize is that this supposedly straight-up media that's supposed to just cover the facts, they really are opinion journalists. And what they wanted to get from you is what they wanted from you. And they would take as much of your time, Sean, as you'd give them to give them the snippet that they wanted. And I agree completely with Joe. In the age of the Internet and no constraints, and with your permission, the only reason why they won't show that interview is because it makes Sean Hannity look good.
And Matt, just one point on that. In talking to a couple of people that have worked in the business for a long time, their argument was that if you or anybody who gets interviewed asks for footage full or a full transcript to be released, that sets a precedent that says...
that exposes all the years that they played this edit fake news game.
Yeah, right.
Come on.
But that's the thing. This isn't a sealed deposition that we're talking about.
No.
This is a conversation between two public figures.
And I'm telling you, it was a good conversation. The interesting thing is I'm bad for America because I have an opinion show. But Ted, to say that, gave his opinion.
Right, that would be a contradictory thing. Go ahead, Matt.
Matt?
Look, and on this other piece, on the editing of Bill Clinton, I mean, this is particularly egregious. This happened at a point in the campaign where a lot of people were worried about Hillary Clinton's health. And if you looked at both videos of her stumbling into that van or being basically carried into that van, this raised real questions about her honesty about her health. What was the situation of her health? Could she serve a full term? And there was no question but that they did everything they could to fix Bill Clinton's interview, because I guess it depends on what the word frequently means, because he started off that interview being honest, and it really just it would have reiterated the concern people had in their minds over his wife's health.
All right, real quick, Les.
There was one more error in that interview where Ted Koppel said, let me finish my sentence and then you could talk. And he said something along the lines of, your audience wants ideology over facts. Right. And then your response was never allowed. An interview never ends with the interviewer making the final point.
That was
the
interviewee
should.
Listen, does it really bother me? No. Do I hate Ted Koppel? No. But it's, you know what? It gave, I think, America an opportunity to see these games that the media's been playing. Right. And that's fake news because it was not representative of what happened in this studio. That's why it's dishonest.
It helped prove your point.
Yeah. All right, guys, thank you. And coming up, the Reverend Franklin Graham will join us later to talk about his brand new movie that's coming out. But first, we'll have the very latest on the rape case in Rockville, Maryland. Defense attorneys for the illegal immigrant rape suspects, they're trying to say this was consensual with the 14-year-old girl. We'll explain and get reaction from Herman Cain. That's next.
When cities and states refuse to help enforce immigration laws, our nation is less safe. Countless Americans would be alive today, and countless loved ones would not be grieving today if these policies of sanctuary cities were ended.
All right, that was the Attorney General Jeff Sessions earlier this week discussing the deadly cost of sanctuary cities that they have on the country. On this program, over the years, we have highlighted families who have been victimized by criminal illegal aliens. And as Fox News has been covering, according to reports, 2 immigrants from Central America, 18-year-old immigrant Henry Sanchez Milian, pictured right there, and 17-year-old Jose Montano allegedly brutally raped a 14-year-old girl in a bathroom stall at a high school in Maryland. Well, now attorneys for the accused, they're saying the sex was consensual, and they're claiming the girl agreed to have sex in text messages, while police claim that the sex was forced. Joining us now with reaction, Fox News contributor Herman Cain. Look, we weren't there. We don't know. This sounds really fishy to me in a lot of ways. But the bigger picture is we have Americans being killed, Americans victims of rape, and we have criminal aliens. I interviewed a father yesterday. His son was killed by an illegal immigrant, Herman, that had held a woman hostage for a week and raped her. And they let this guy go. And then they killed this kid that was working overnight at a convenience store.
Sean, this is another despicable incident of why we need to, one, keep illegals out of the country and get illegals out of the country. Attorney General Jeff Sessions was exactly right. Too many Americans have died because of illegals in this country. But what the Democrats do is that they try to gloss over this and make it sound as if it's about being against everybody that's here. What the Trump administration is trying to do is to try to minimize the number of illegals in order to hopefully prevent an incident like the one that happened in Maryland. Now, this attorney is planting a seed even before the trial begins in order to try to defend these two illegals. It's despicable, and I totally support what Attorney General Sessions and the Trump administration are trying to do.
Let me put up on the side of the screen, and I'll read them as I put them up here, Herman. You know, we have, according to a July report 2015, the Migration Policy Institute, 820,000 illegal immigrants are convicted criminals. And you got another one. According to the U.S. Sentencing Commission, in 2015, 36.6% of federal offenses were committed by illegal aliens. Then you got in Texas alone, between June of 2011 and February 2017, there was 1,162 homicide charges filed against illegal aliens in Texas alone. 2011 through 2017. 68,151 assaults. And you go further, Texas alone, between the same years, you've got 6,098 sexual assault charges filed against illegals. And for the life of me, if you are Mayor Rambo Deadfish or Comrade de Blasio or the LA mayor or San Francisco politician, how do you get away with aiding and abetting people that we know break the law? Because you'd be put in jail, Herman, and I'd be in the cell with you.
Exactly. They have gotten a pass for the last 8 years from the previous administration. They think it's okay. We now have a president and an administration that says it's not okay to break the law. Now, here's what they are not talking about. Defunding these cities, if they don't cooperate with the federal agencies, that's just step one. They could be indicted. Nobody's talking about that. They are breaking the law if they do not work with federal agencies in order to enforce the laws on the books. That's all this administration is trying to do.
All right, Herman, it's sad, and I applaud.
It is.
Finally, you know what? These cities, these states, they need to pay the price. And it appears this Attorney General is going to uphold the rule of law. Thank you for being with us, sir.
Yes.
And up next, the Reverend Franklin Graham. He'll join us. He's got a brand new movie out tomorrow, an incredible real-life story and documentary you don't want to miss. Next.